All right, we're here at the Mill Valley Film Festival, the 33rd Mill Valley Film Festival, and this is Aspect Ratio Mill Valley Film Festival. And I'm John Morrison, and I have with me a filmmaker, a director of documentary called Atomic Mom, and her name is MT Silvia, and we're going to talk about that film, which is a very, very dynamic film about the atomic bomb and about your mom. And what is the genesis? I mean, it's such a refreshing, almost a hybrid, of a personal film, but also a film that's very informative about a subject too.
Mm-hmm. Well, it started when I just wanted to record my mother's story for family history, and I thought, I'm just going to record it for family history, and that was my simple intention. And then later on, I brought my mother back to Las Vegas to tour the test site with me, and to go to the new Atomic Testing Museum in Las Vegas. And
great scene.
There was a woman there named Mary Pilevsky who was doing an oral history project on the Nevada test site workers, and she had never interviewed a woman scientist before. There was a lot of men who worked out there in higher level positions, but most of the women were clerical or administrative, and she had never talked to a scientist. So she was very interested in talking to my mom, and that's when I hired a real camera crew and decided to really shoot this as a documentary. So that was the first.
Right. So the genesis of the film then came out of that one incident. I mean, I'm sure you had it on your mind anyways, but I mean, the incident of going to the museum and then kind of moving right into doing a professional production rather than a
home video.
Home video, right?
Yeah. It the whole thing has had such a life of its own. There's been so much serendipity around it. After I did that first shoot in Las Vegas, I wasn't sure where I would go with the story. And my camera crew are very dear friends of mine, and they said to me, "You have to get in the film." And I said, "Oh, no, I'm not going to get in the film." And they said, "Oh, yeah, you need to be in it." And I kept resisting and saying, no. And we got back from Las Vegas on a Friday, and Sunday morning my doorbell rang, and there they were with all their gear, and they said, "Sit down, we're going to interview you." And I said, "Okay, but, I'll probably never use it, but okay." And then I went kicking and screaming, but I had to get into the film. I had to become the conduit between my mother and Okada-san once I met Miss Okada.
Yeah. Actually, we should bring that into it so that people know what we're talking about. The story is of moms, but it's of two moms, and it's your mom, and then there's Okada-san.
My day job was sending me to Japan, and I took a couple of extra vacation days and decided to go to Hiroshima. And I emailed the Hiroshima Peace Museum about 3 weeks before I left, and asked if I could bring a camera inside the museum and shoot the museum. And I thought, my simple intention then was that I thought I would just juxtapose the Hiroshima Museum against the Atomic Testing Museum in Las Vegas, and they're radically different. And in the process, they hooked me up with this wonderful woman from the Hiroshima Film Commission who got me carte blanche to film anywhere in Hiroshima, got all the location fees waived. And she asked me if I wanted to interview a survivor, and I hadn't thought of that. And I thought, well, wow, okay, yeah, that might be interesting. And she said, well, what kind of survivor do you want to interview? And that made me a little uncomfortable. I felt like I was shopping for a survivor or something, And I had some friends over for dinner who were all journalists, and they said, why don't you try to find a mother with a daughter and make a parallel between you and your mother? And I thought, what a great idea. And so I emailed her back and said, can you find me a mother with a daughter? And that's how I met Miss Okada.
Yeah. And what amazed me about the film MT was that it did have that. It really did, in your editing. It really did have that kind of personal discovery aspect to it. I mean, kudos to both of you and to your editor too. So
I was horrified to find out that they were putting our foot soldiers in these trenches around at varying distances from ground zero without any protective clothing. It became obvious that there was no communication between the researchers and the Army who were putting these foot soldiers in. I just dismissed it from my mind. That's the way in which nowadays they call it compartmentalizing. There's a name for it. And so I just put that into another compartment and continued on with what my assignment was. When you're in the military, the ground rules are set, and you know what those ground rules are, and you buy into that and you do what's expected of you. They were doing the same things to those men that we did to the animals. But did they study those men? That's a piece that's missing. And that is probably why it was so hard for the atomic veterans to get medical care for their illnesses.
Can you tell a little bit of the background of your mom?
Well, my mom, she was born in 1930, so at 21 years old in 1951, she really wanted to be a scientist. And there were very few opportunities for women in the early 1950s to do anything like that. And so she joined the military so she could become a scientist. And the assignment, she was given two opportunities. One was to go to the Pentagon, and I'm not sure what her job would have been there. She can't remember. Mm-hmm. And the other one was to go to the San Francisco to the Naval Radiological Defense Laboratory in Hunters Point. And she chose San Francisco, but she had no idea what she was going to be working on.
Yeah. And she worked, and she turned up working on the atomic bomb.
So her job was to, they were doing research on the effects of radiation. Mm-hmm. And her job as a biologist was to put animals so far from ground zero out at the Nevada test site, they would detonate the bomb, and then she would go out and retrieve whatever she could find and study. It was mainly with mice. And then she would come back to San Francisco and replicate those experiments using X-rays as the source of radiation, or the UC Berkeley cyclotron. Mm-hmm. And then after about a year and a half of that research, they changed into thermal injuries, which is where she started working with dogs, and which is the most upsetting to her to think about today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Just to bring a little my own personal story in here, it's funny because I did a video of my mom and dad about a year before my dad died, and my dad was in World War II. And I just kind of mentioned, because I was born in 1946, and so I just kind of mentioned, and then the bomb was dropped and the end of the war, because he was in the Pacific. And the words weren't even out of my mouth before he said, we had to do that. And it strikes me from your documentary that this was this sort of a repressed memory mm-hmm. for a lot of people of that generation mm-hmm. and of your mom's generation, because they were working, on it. Mm-hmm. Am I accurate there? Or?
Yeah. Well, I think people were just so hungry for the war to be over that, and although the dropping of the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki marked the end of the war, it's pretty clear in a lot of the research and documentation that the war was over. And the United States was negotiating a surrender with Japan, but we wanted an unconditional surrender. And what the Japanese wanted was to retain their emperor as their deity, as their god. And the United States wouldn't agree to that, and that's what was holding up the surrender. And again, we spent quite a bit of money building these bombs, mm-hmm. and they wanted to test them. And you could argue that possibly the first atomic bomb may have been justifiable. But the second one, I can't see that being justifiable at all. They were two very different bombs. One was a uranium bomb, one was a plutonium bomb. They were clearly testing these weapons.
And yet it's not something that's really talked about anymore, period.
Mm-mm.
And that's why part of, not only the film, part of what your mom is talking about is a very kind of brave thing to do, and very extremely touching, since it was so personal with her.
Mm-hmm.
Do you view it as a political film?
Oh yeah, I view it as the personal as political.
Yeah.
And the thing is we're all downwind of this story.
Mm-hmm.
We all are affected by this, and we hold this legacy of. I'm a second-generation radiation survivor. There are many people in the United States who don't realize how much they were exposed to from the fallout from the testing of the Nevada test site. I mean, almost 1,000 bombs were detonated in the air at that test site up until 1963. And all that fallout came out across the United States. And cows ate the grass, and, it went as far as New York. And a lot of people don't know that. And a lot of it was covered up. But the thing that's political about it that makes it relevant today is there's just as much secrecy around these weapons today as there were during the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
And we are using depleted uranium weapons in Iraq. And there are civilians and Gulf War veterans that are suffering from radiation illness because of those weapons.
Right.
So it's still relevant today, and the fact that we're on hair-trigger alert. A lot of people don't realize we're still on hair-trigger alert between the United States and Russia, who collectively we have like 95% of the nuclear weapons in the world. And in my interview with Helen Caldicott, she told me that there are 40 weapons targeted on Manhattan alone. And these bombs are way bigger than the ones that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So, I mean, this is catastrophic, and it's a much higher risk than global warming right now. I mean, we could destroy this planet with one single mistake now.
Yeah.
So it affects all of us.
So you've got 60 kids downstairs, because we're talking up in the VIP room at the Rafael Film Center, and we're going to have an education screening is going on right now of the film, and they're teenagers, and I'm guessing that most of what they're going to see in the film is going to be totally new to them. What without giving away your whole thing that you're going to do with them, it's just a Q&A. What do you think a message is for that very younger generation?
Well, my hope is that people will ask questions, and that's how this whole story started for me. Was I started asking questions, and I found out all these things that I didn't know about my mother, all these things that I didn't know about the Nevada test site and the United States accountability for the development of nuclear weapons. And so I hope they ask questions. I hope they go home and ask their mom about her past, or really have a dialogue about how they feel about what's going on in the world today with nuclear weapons.
Yeah. Well, not only with nuclear weapons, but that's an interesting tack too. Of course, it's an integral part of the film, but it's both my parents are long gone, and you just always have that feeling. Gee, I wish I'd asked them that question, But I did do a video of my parents, and you did this video of your mom, or more than just a video, a whole film. And it is a good call, isn't it, to question your parents about who you are, what did you do, I don't think most kids do you?
No, I mean, I think we think our parents' lives began when we were born, and there's this whole other part of their lives that we don't experience. And there's so much to know there. Yeah.
Well, that's great. So, I mean, were some of the things that you discovered? How did you deal with them personally? I mean, it's not like it was like a huge. I mean, not an emotional, deep dark secret, but it was it was definitely something new, you know, and
well, it was complicated.
Complicated, yeah.
And it was tough, and I mean it's cost me a lot in therapy, but also also making the film was therapy.
Yeah.
You know, and I feel so much better about all of it than I did, you know, 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think going through this process with my mother and watching the compassion she expresses towards the people in Japan and Miss Okada specifically, and then watching the compassion that comes back from Miss Okada, where she offers my mother this beautiful olive branch, basically, and that helped me to become more compassionate too, you know, and I think that's the key to becoming part of the global human family. Yeah. You know.
Do you want to just tell us a little bit about Miss Okada as far as her experience with the bomb?
Miss Okada was 8 years old when the bomb was dropped, and her sister was never found. And she was having breakfast with her two brothers and her mother the morning, and heard the plane and saw the flash, and they were far enough away that they survived, but her mother had a miscarriage several days later. And her mother, when her mother did eventually die, still had shards of glass embedded in her skull. But they went out looking for her sister for days and you know, could not find a trace of her. And they had to survive in this burnt down city with nothing to eat, not even garbage. I mean, everything was destroyed. And thinking about an 8-year-old child having to survive that and the memories she has of it. And the thing that was really compelling about Miss Okada as well is that she didn't talk about it for many, many years either. And only recently did her and her daughter have a conversation about it. So I thought that was an interesting parallel between my mother and Miss Okada.
Well, in fact, Japanese society didn't really address it for years.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was the other thing that I learned that I didn't know was the press code, the censorship in Japan right after the bombings, that no one could write about it, no one could take photographs, or, you know, write books. Anything was censored until 1952.
Yeah.
So a lot of people didn't know what happened.
Yeah. It's a very interesting point in history, and I think it's something that's, you know, I think it's something that's going to be on the radar a lot more. And maybe you're on the leading edge of it, but you know, I do think it's going to be on the radar a lot more as we progress, particularly with the political situation that's happening now in South Asia. But I thank you very much for the film, and I thank your mom.
Thank you.
And we're going to look forward to seeing it later on in the festival, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what these young kids think too.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Thank you, MT.
Thank you.
Come on, Kelly. Go get him, Tiger. Fine?
I'm sorry, and you are? How are you? You're my puppy. How are you?
Very good. And you?
Can you tell?
Well, it was intense for a commercial, I have to say. It was like to make a film with 10 big world stars. Well, the logistics were a nightmare. Yeah. Sometimes were fun, and the results were pretty much good, I think.
And were you a big football fan?
I like football a lot, you know.
So you were happy with the results?
Yeah, I'm happy.
How long did it take to film that commercial?
To that?
Yes.
2 months.
Nice
How
to
are
meet
you?
you.
Nice
Good,
to
and you? I'm working with the Creative Channel here in Marin City. It seems like Latino directors work together, like Spanish and Mexican directors work collaboratively together. How does that work exactly? Did you ever notice this?
More than anything, we have a great friendship, and that friendship really ended up being always like a good consultancy kind of, you know, suggestions and therapy.
Okay. Okay. And so do you work with many other directors together in collaboration?
Well, more than anything is, as I tell you, is just we talk, we send the scripts, we criticize, we destroy each other, we challenge and shake the tree.
Challenge and
Shake the tree, and that's what we do.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, we're the Creative Channel in Marin TV, in Marin County. I've noticed you like playing in psychological thrillers. What makes this genre so appealing to you?
Well, I don't know. I've done about 3 of them out of 25 films, so I don't really think it's much of a theme for me. But
It's not a theme, okay. And did De Niro challenge you, playing with him, acting with De Niro within a challenge, or?
a challenge, but only in the best way. You know, I mean, the material was challenging, so. In many ways, working with someone who's as good as he is, in many ways makes it easier. You know, you're not going against each other; you're collaborating. So I love working with him. He's great.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Hi, this is Yoko. My dear friends, 7 years ago today, October 9, 1940, John Lennon was born in Liverpool, England. He had a very painful childhood in which he hardly saw his mother or his father. But later, he managed to turn his pain around to give the world many beautiful songs and important messages which changed our heads and the way of our lives. And I now see you are all celebrating his birthday today. To thank him for giving us so much in his short and intense life on this planet. I know John was not expecting so much love to still come from you, but he would have been very happy to know it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. May all of us heal ourselves and learn to love each other in peace. I love you.